We'd like to welcome you to BmoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. We're here with the one and only Marsha Jews, and she has some questions for me. You like the yellow?
I love the yellow. Michigan. What's up with Michigan? What's
I
up?
got fans in Michigan. They sent me the whole gear.
Stop.
Yeah.
Oh, you got the hoodie, the hat. That's a hookup.
Yep. Even Pharaoh got something.
What? What Pharaoh get? Hey, Pharaoh.
Hey, Pharaoh.
Hey, Pharaoh.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hey, how was your weekend? What did you do? Did you do anything special? Because you know you always out and about. What did you see? Who did you see? Where did you see them?
I made some lamb and beef barley stew.
What? Where'd you get that recipe? What was that?
Huh?
Where you got a recipe for lamb stew?
Well, I've been talking to the chef people that I know. Hey
what
there.
Chef people?
Come on and join us. That's Jessica. Is that Jessica? It looks like Jessica. Come on and join us, Jessica. What'd you say?
Hey, Jessica. I said, where did you get a lamb stew recipe?
From my chef friends, like Rennie.
Like Rennie. Okay. And so you made it. What all went in it? Do you have the ingredients? You know what the ingredients?
Yeah.
Okay, what'd you put in? I've never had lamb stew.
Well, first you got to get the lamb tips. That's the most important part.
What, the tip of the bone, or what does that mean? I don't know.
As Rennie suggested, you want to go to a butcher.
Okay.
And have you ever gotten beef tips?
More like pork tips. You know, at the barbecue place.
Same thing. You sear them a little bit. Actually, I slow cook mine.
Oh yeah.
You could sear the meat, or you could sear the meat, or you could bake it. And I choose to bake mine for a long time.
I love it.
Few hours. Then you got to get your onions, your carrots, your celery. Now I've been watching those recipes, and they chop these up real fine. Them little, I haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, you got it, and you got to get the right knife too. You got to get the right knife, and it has to be really, really sharp. That's a whole thing, just in and of itself.
Are you Puerto Rican?
No. Are you?
Well, actually, I am. But you know, you got to watch them Puerto Ricans with knives.
Yeah, but we're gonna have a different conversation, Mr. Parker. Mr. Parker, how are you today?
It's been a long time.
It's been way too long.
Yes, indeed.
COVID, brother.
COVID is yeah.
It's first on the menu, man. What?
It is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Hey, Donnie.
Quay, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good.
Marsha, before we get to Quay, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell folks who may not know you. I mean, there's still some people within 9 billion or so on the planet Earth who have never heard of Marsha Jews. Who are you?
Who are you? This sounds creepy. Marsha, just Marsha, little country girl from Indiana, and lived a lot of different places, did a lot of different things, ended up in Baltimore, left, came back. I like Baltimore. And I would just like to stir the pot.
Okay. And what's that famous place you're going to retire to? What's that island?
Oh, Virgin Gorda.
You ever heard of Virgin Gorda, Quay?
I haven't. I was sitting there waiting. I was like, wait a minute, Virgin Gorda.
Yes, it's fabulous. It is the British Virgin Islands. And it's really beautiful. It's real quiet. Or it used to be. I don't know. I haven't been there in a couple of years. But it is wonderful. You know, sometimes you get to the islands and they're like, it's almost like going to Vegas somewhere. You know what I mean? There's so much stuff happening. But a place to have peace and whatever. I was on a board, the Stone Soup Leadership Institute. And we had a group of young people down there, and it was the Virgin Gorda Youth Leadership Institute. And it was wonderful. So we were down there for about, off and on for 6, 7 years. It was really great. And we did the same thing in Vieques, Puerto Rico, actually. So
Would you buy a house
Hawaii.
there?
Yeah, I could live there. The only thing I've been noticing, though, and I've been kind of shaky on this, there have been a lot of hurricanes in that region. So that's been kind of, I'm just watching it, but I'd really like to live there. I just don't know about this weather and how it's changed so dramatically. But, it's climate change. So.
Okay, as you noted, we've been joined by Quay Parker. Quay, you shared something interesting with me over the weekend. You said that a person can get funding for a home from places other than banks.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you know that, Marsha?
Yeah, but go ahead, because I don't know. I can't talk about it.
Yeah, actually, the only difference between direct mortgage lenders, when you get into the mortgage retail category, direct mortgage lenders and a bank essentially would just be that banks take deposits. In many cases, because banks have so many different or so much overhead, the lending portion of the lending activity becomes the main revenue stream. So a lot of people find it more economical to even work with direct lenders versus depository institutions. Because you look at it, they're not making money as much money giving you a 0.5% return on your savings account. Mm-hmm. They're making money somewhere. Yep.
Correct. And so the question then becomes how you don't have the overhead that a bank would have, but then are you able to give more in terms of deposit, or initial funding, or how else can you get that savings?
That's a great question. Because of all the regulations, especially since Dodd-Frank, that banks are now dealing with, it's a lot easier for private lenders. I actually left the banking side to come back to direct lending because it's a lot easier to facilitate the products that we need in our community. So yes, we can do a lot of products. One of the main challenges in the banking environment is getting a board of directors to agree to a lot of different products that are necessary. Being able to do small loan products, being able to do the loan products that are for people who are, for example, self-employed and their income's not as easy to understand. So yes, it's a myriad of additional products that we're able to give access to that in most cases banks can't.
So small loan products, that sounds like there's a menu.
Yes. See, I think with the last housing crisis, a lot of institutions got the impression that they were bad loan products. I don't believe that. I believe just like with, for example, medication, the medication is not bad, it's the application. Mm-hmm. So, for example, now with Dodd-Frank, for example, they banned loans where a person can't document their income, because the way that argument was framed is that people were taking loans that weren't qualified because they were getting loans with no doc loans, so forth. But now we have, for example, I recently saw a borrower who was buying a $500,000 house. They were foreign national. They wanted to put down $350,000, only financing $150,000. A1 credit, everything in line, but they couldn't. They showed losses on the returns, on the tax returns, or their income was from abroad. It was something unique. To me, that's a great credit risk, but because of Dodd-Frank, we can't even make this loan because they don't have income in the traditional way. Mm-hmm. So a lot of restrictions because a lot of the laws that were framed were just from one perspective. Obviously, that's there to prevent the retiree from getting $1 million mortgage on a stated income loan and they get, $5,000 a month retirement. But the other side of that would be the limits it places on legitimate borrowers who qualify.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what would you say that people should do in order to prepare for all of this, particularly somebody who owns a small business?
Oh, a lot of times people forget that there's multiple perspectives for accounting. There's budgeting, there's tax minimization, and then there's also your ability to borrow and leverage. So if you own a small business, you have to make sure you're clear with your CPA exactly what your strategies are. It may not be wise to always write everything off if you're trying to grow, because you're going to need to show enough income in order to take advantage of a lot of lending opportunities. The pandemic is a perfect example. With all the stimulus money,
Right.
I can't tell you how many businesses couldn't take part or couldn't fully benefit because they've understated their financials. They didn't have their paperwork in place.
Mm-hmm. That's huge. And I know sometimes I have to really sit down and figure out what I'm doing, because you get so busy trying to just make it happen that you aren't always doing what you're supposed to do behind the scenes to make it so that it's strong.
Yes.
Quay, does redlining still take place in the United States?
What you think?
That's a good question. I have to tread lightly on this one. Fannie Mae has an interesting policy which allows them to do loan level pricing. The term is loan level pricing, which they identify certain zip codes and areas in which the lending risks are higher. And as a result, they can charge more or place limitations on those areas. For example, something that really baffles me is, for example, certain counties, FHA and Fannie Mae have loan limits. And these loan limits are established based upon the income or the cost of living in an area. For example, in the Baltimore metro area, the loan limits are approximately around 510. However, if you go into the DC metro area, you're looking at 765. Most of us realize that the DC metro area extends to certain counties. But Prince George's County, Frederick County, Calvert County, they allow the loan limit at 765. However, when you get into Howard County and Arundel County, those counties are right there neighboring, and they're at 510. I've always questioned the motive for limiting loan restrictions, because that makes it so the only people that can buy in those counties and those price points are people who have significant cash down.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
I'm just curious on how these maps were created. There seem to be some trends here that
you already know.
need to be explored.
You already know. And what I also find very interesting is how can these developers who are going into quote unquote at-risk communities get this money to do the building that they want to do?
Private equity.
Gentrification.
And we had this conversation. It's funny you say that. We jumped on as collective as people the Dodd-Frank bill because of who was supporting it, without necessarily holding them accountable for the policies inside. One of the things that one of the components of Dodd-Frank was basically a restriction on lenders to charge a fixed profit margin or fixed overhead across the board on all of their transactions. For example, so if you're a mortgage lender and your average client is, let's say their average transaction is $250,000, you know exactly what your costs are to provide services. So you're going to set a percentage of a loan amount that you're going to assign as your margin in order to service the community. For example, if your loan amount, like we said, was $250,000 and you operate with a 2% margin, then yes, you can make money and you can operate and pay your employee with $5,000, because that would be 2% of $250,000. But if we turn that, and now we're in the communities that often are underserved, and you have a family that, let's say, inherited a property that's worth $100,000, but they only need $30,000 to fix it up. It's near impossible to loan that family $30,000, but it would be easy to loan them $100,000 just because of that margin pricing. Because on $30,000, the gross for the institution would be $600 for that transaction, where in the other area it would be $5,000 on 250. It's just impossible to make those numbers work. There was no consideration for how people who are in lower income or buying at lower price points or have homes that are worth less are impacted. So as a result, this is what often happens. I think this is contributing to gentrification, because that same house they can't get money to fix up. They can't get the $30,000 to fix up. They can sell to someone who has cash from outside the community. That person fixes it up and sells it right back to them for $150,000, capitalizing on the profit, where just by allowing these funds to be accessible in the community, we would keep the wealth inside of ours. So a lot of systemic
racism
policies that I think are really affecting us.
I'll say it for you. A lot of racism is going on in that red line. And you can't say it, but I certainly can. And you know what? The thing that really is also very upsetting to me is really putting all that you just said, because I understood some of it, but I didn't understand everything that you said for real.
Sure.
And so how do we package that information so that everybody really understands what those numbers are and how to navigate within those numbers and that system?
Sure.
Right?
Or is it possible at all?
You know what? At first, I've spoken to quite a few people at a political level about with the first impression of they were not knowledgeable about how these the side effects of these policies.
Right.
And however, I'm not as sure that it's a lack of understanding the impact versus accepting the collateral damage. I think the consumers have to be educated, but when you get into the financial realm, that's not the easiest to educate folks on. They're complex, but I think there need to be when policymakers and even the local politicians are addressing financial bills, they shouldn't just start at the C-suite at the big banks. They need to speak at the ground level to the people in the community issuing loans to see how laws will impact the people that are actually putting them in office.
Well, I think that this is a very good forum, Doni, that, there could be workshops that people would be in an environment like this where folks who actually know and can help shape the laws to really understand what they should be doing. Because sometimes people don't know what they don't even know.
Absolutely.
Right?
So let me share this. President Donald Trump signed into law the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act on May 24th, 2018. The act rolls, and this is going back to your Dodd-Frank Act. Mm-hmm. The act rolls back some of the provisions of the Dodd-Frank Act that were found to be overly burdensome and or difficult to comply with, particularly for community banks. Title I of that act, entitled Improving Consumer Access to Mortgage Credit, attempts to alleviate or at least lessen some of the burdens that Dodd-Frank placed upon residential mortgage lenders.
Yes.
Can you
absolutely. Basically, with the creation of what's called the CFPB, I think it's Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, there were a lot of regulations placed on banks and lending institutions, which cause a great expense, financial burden on us that would be passed down to consumers. However, what we're discussing now would be under the compensation for mortgage lenders. That was not changed. There needs to be some safeguards in there for predatory lending, but there need to be provisions to encourage, not discourage, financial institutions to actually do what's called micro mortgage lending. And that's sub $75,000, because that's where there's a real void. So if there could even be like a minimum amount per transaction, that would allow us to get in that space and really help more people.
Did this legislation help consumers, or did it help banks? Because I figured Trump would be about helping banks.
Right.
Well, I found that whenever you help the institution alleviate red tape, you are passing it down to consumers. Because the more stipulations and the more regulations you place on lending activity, the more borrowers are going to be scrutinized. So it always trickles down. I think we just have to be conscious of making sure that the policies have the ability to have the greatest impact at all levels, not just at the higher income brackets, not just for the shareholders of the banks, but they really can trickle down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's also very interesting, because a lot of those banks, when you have the people sitting there that are giving out the loans, they don't know one from the other. They have 4 rules and regulations that they have to adhere to. They check those off and then they roll out.
Yes.
and particularly communities of color, they're going to be redlined, and there's nothing you can say or do to make that change. And so the bigger piece is, how do you create an environment where, Baltimore has, I don't even know how many hundreds of thousands, or 60,000, or how many vacancies, right?
Mhm.
How do you create an environment where people could go back in and buy those and rebuild them, and get the mortgage money to do, or whatever kind of money to do that once you buy them? How do we create more home ownership if we have all of these standards surrounding us and impacting?
You're asking some great questions. You sure
I'm
you
sorry.
have a banking real estate background?
Well, I have had a real estate license, and I worked in a bank, and I was one of those people. They fired me. First National Bank and Trust in South Bend, Indiana. Well,
Wow.
whatever. It was 100 years ago. I was young, in my 20s, so that was,
Did you like leave the bank during lunch with some of their property?
No, I was giving out loans to Black people in all the little Black neighborhoods that I wasn't supposed to.
She's got
Because they were trying to build, fix their house up. They were trying to do that. And I'd give them, I had a certain little amount. I wasn't a big girl, but I was giving the loans out, and they fired me.
Give her a pink slip, please. Send her home.
Right. They said, Marsha, do you know what we've noticed that you've been giving out these loans? And they were only like 1,500, 2,500, little bitty things, right? But there were people, Black people in South Bend, less than 4% were Black. So we knew everybody. And so if somebody came in and said, I need to fix my furnace, I need a new furnace, I'd give them the money, because I know they wasn't going to give it to them. I didn't care. They fired me, but I didn't care. And that's real. So I'm saying all that because I had that experience when I was younger.
Quay, is this a good time to buy a house?
It's a good time to buy the right house.
The right house.
The right house.
Whoa.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
If you're purchasing for need, I find that we have a trend now where people are purchasing for luxury, not necessarily necessity. If you're purchasing for the financial benefits of owning a home, for the long game, it's absolutely always a good time, because it's like the stock market. I can't tell you where prices will go. Some are saying that it's inflated. Some are saying the market's just right. I can't speculate. What I can say is, if you're purchasing a home, it's not a 2-3 year investment. You have to look at it as a 10-15 year. Things can drop and things can go back up. You never know when it's going to happen. But you said something before I want to kind of chime in on about the vacant homes. The vacant to value program in Baltimore, I'm actually impressed by how efficiently they operate. I've actually had the pleasure of working with a lot of people down there at the city of Baltimore, and it's not as hard to acquire these properties as people think. In fact, there are provisions to allow consumers to get priority to purchase these properties over the investors. The challenge is not the financial obstacles, because we actually specialize in renovation loans to help these homes for homeowners get purchased and renovated. The obstacles are the consumers are typically conditioned to want something they can walk into turnkey. A lot of that's driven by the real estate market, because obviously, and I respect all my realtors that are out there that support us greatly, but realtors are not inclined to push those properties, because realtors only compensated on the purchase price. And obviously, buying a $3,000 to $5,000 house that needs a whole bunch of renovations is not going to be the financial rewarding transaction for the agents.
Right.
So if consumers are educated and they want to pursue these themselves, we've done workshops with contractors before, encouraging people to buy these homes, because you can gain equity, where the investors are doing these projects and walking away with 30 to 40% equity. Even if you did it and you walked in your home not upside down, that would be a plus to the average consumer, just being able to have some equity walking in day one. But the mindset.
Wait. Explain upside down.
Sure.
That's a whole area.
Absolutely. When you purchase a home,
you owe me $20 and you're trying to borrow 5 more times and you ain't paid on the first 20. That's upside down.
What people miss is, when you purchase a home, the buyer is not paying money to enter into the transaction. That money is the cost of the real estate agent, and the bulk of the cost to purchase, or the bulk of the cost in a real estate transaction is being incurred by the seller who is paying the real estate agent. So if the real estate agent is being paid by the seller, which is typically 6% approximately, and then you have transfer taxes of 2%, miscellaneous. What I tell buyers is it on average costs 10% to liquidate real estate. So if a person is buying a home with no money down in a retail market, day one, they're 10% negative, because an asset is only worth assets of value is essentially the value of the asset minus whatever it costs to liquidate. Does that make sense?
No.
So if you're buying a property at, say, $100,000,
if you want
to sell it, if you want to sell it 2 months later and the value is still $100,000,
you get 90.
Factor in, you're only going to net 90. So you have to be in that house long enough for that balance to get down to 90,000 before you can even sell it. And
before you can sell it
and walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I think that we have to start considering as a community is entering into transactions prepared for the long term, or putting money down. There's a trend focusing on getting in with as little as possible, not realizing that you're putting yourself in a position where you essentially owe more than the property's worth. So if you wanted to relocate, you wanted to move up, you wanted to sell the property 3 years later, how are you going to do this? You can't until you pay that balance down, or you're gambling on the fact that the house is going to appreciate in value, which may or may not happen in a short window of time.
Quay, I don't know how you're going to take this question, because it's not necessarily about your sales.
Sure.
But here in Baltimore, I've seen it time and time again where the children have moved, the parent who owns the house in the city dies, and that property is left to rot.
Yeah, that happens more. I probably get a request for help with those situations more often than you'd imagine, probably every week.
Wow.
You see whole communities where you can look at the communities and you can visually see the change, because what people forget is that communities usually are driven by demographics. So if you look at certain communities, basically everyone who purchases is relatively in the same age bracket. So the communities tend to turn over. The cycles of life will make the communities turn over. And when it really becomes problematic, like you described in Donnie, is when that happens in mass over a 5-10 year period. You can see the neighborhood change, because frequently the kids are not financially vested. The kids don't have the resources to maintain the property. So I think parents need to really consider their estate strategies really carefully.
You mean like a will?
Yeah, just the estate, just not just the will, but we're at a stage now where a lot of the next generations don't want to live in mama's house. So if mama's paying off the house, wanting to give it to the kids with an expectation of them preserving it, things have changed. Frequently, that's what they have in mind.
But I just want to throw this in there. Increasingly, my neighbors here in Sandtown are white. So my point is, Black women, I got to push this on you somewhat. Black women want to move to Randallstown, but Karen is moving down the block, and she bought 2-3-story houses, and they look really good.
Yeah.
Now, there's some people, some Black people coming back to the community. I saw a 3-story house a guy from Randallstown moved into, and he gets a lot more house for his dollar than he did in Owens Mills. So, you're weighing things, but I'm seeing white people coming back to the hood very strongly.
Sure. Right. The community migrations happened. We saw it happen in the Park Heights area to the transition, that same community that transitioned from Park Heights transitioned to Reisterstown, Green Spring. They transferred then to down to Canton. It changes constantly.
Quay, how can a house in Canton that's no bigger, is this big, and they want $200,000 for it, for the same house that's up in Sandtown that's going for $20,000 in a flood zone?
Right.
Well, here's the catch. I think what we have to reevaluate is we essentially control our communities. we control the amenities, the things that we place in our communities. If
No, we don't. I don't think we control it.
Let me share with you how that works. If we purchase in an area, we want to use, I have to be very careful because I have regulations I have to look at. If you look at the different communities that have migrated, let's say from the city to the county, you'll look at the businesses that open to cater to these demographics. You'll see those things shifted. If you look at the businesses that were on the Liberty Road corridor when it was more diverse, and you look at the businesses that are there now, you can tell where the migration is going to occur by the businesses that start to migrate there.
Well, what about when the supermarkets on Liberty Road leave?
I think what's necessary is, I think our biggest mistake in our community was supporting big box brands and allowing the grocery stores like the Bains and different grocers to go out of business. We have to be very careful as a people having all of our critical infrastructure outside of our community, because then you have things like that occur where a major food franchise is not committed to healthy food in certain communities. They're committed to profitability and an image for their brand.
A Giant at Liberty and Milford is closed?
Well, how did we let a Baines Stop Shop and Save close in the middle of all of our Black communities?
Right.
We went from being on the Black Enterprise's top retail, or being one of the top businesses, to not being able to survive. These things are happening on our own watch. See, back to what Kelsey's project, my daughter's Think Black app, was mentioning. We have to get to a point where we stop believing that white ice is colder.
Ooh, that sounds like something I heard when I was a child.
And until we get to that point, we're so focused on being able to support the quote unquote brands that we take pride in representing, that we don't understand the essential aspect of maintaining our own key resources. I was watching the Black Lives Matter movement, and everybody's like, okay, we need to separate. I'm like, no, we don't. If we wanted to go back to Africa, how could we? What Black airline would take us there?
Right.
What Black fuel company? What Black utility company are we going to rely on?
What shipping?
What shipping? But we can't even get that far.
Right.
Where are we going to get food?
Right.
Black farms can supply us. We don't control our critical infrastructure. So we have to be very careful. Yeah, on what that looks like. So I think it starts by just saying, at baby steps, as a lender in my own community, it's amazing how I can observe the standards that are placed on us and the expectations placed on Black providers that are not placed on other groups. It's ridiculous, where it's an expectation. You're not supporting Black business coming for a hookup, coming in skeptical, or demanding a level of accessibility or service that you wouldn't demand of everyone else. That's more putting us in a position to fail, or looking for a reason to continue not supporting us.
Right.
Where I think the key is to intentionally try to support and spin business within our own community with a level of tolerance and expectation that we do not have a Bank of America servicing the Black community right now. We don't have a Black Bank of America. We can't expect Harbor Bank to have the number of branches, resources, amenities, and money to throw into the organizations that quote unquote stamp the approval for the Black community. That you have to look at things from a standpoint of intentional support of Black communities. No other way.
Well, and I think it's almost like a self-hatred thing. You see everybody spending thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars on some doggone Gucci. I was one of them. You wanted all that stuff, and they could care less about our community, anything that we're doing, and we still give that support, but we don't support our own. And it's bigger than, there's some depth to that, and it probably would take somebody at the Black Mental Health Alliance to really be able to describe it and to explain what it is that we need as a people in order for us to feel good about going and doing business with you. I mean, I feel very good that I have an account at Harbor Bank.
Yes.
Right. And I make sure that I keep something in there, right, on a regular basis. And I use it for certain pieces of my business. That's what I do. And it's my business account that's at Harbor Bank.
Sure.
But we have to really understand what we need to do as a people to thrive and to grow. Explain to me why we have so many boarded up schools and why we as a Black community whose children are being impacted, we don't have enough money to give all these kids in the city of Baltimore computers and the technology to run them, to learn what they need to learn.
Now,
right.
That
take a deep breath, right?
That is slightly out of my area of expertise. I will slightly endeavor upon it. I will use it. I don't know if it's a lack of resources or a lack of priority.
I think it's a lack of political will, because all of this money is touted for new school construction, but these new schools are not coming into my community.
Right.
Well, let's look at not just Baltimore. Let's look at Prince George's County. Prince George's County has one of the highest per capita incomes for African Americans in the country. We have some of the most affluent communities, Black communities in Prince George's County, but they have their schools are rated poorly.
Right.
And if schools are driven on property taxes and you have high values, then where's the justification for school districts? Now, also, what we have to also look at is they're going to make the argument of population density in different areas, where Anne Arundel County, they have a huge budget, but the percentage of people in Anne Arundel County, I recently found this out, that actually have children in school is like less than 40% or something like that. Right. So they have more money in their budget. I think the pandemic and how quickly the stimulus bill created funds shows that it's just a matter of prioritization. It's not a matter of resources. We find money for what we need.
Baltimore City puts the least amount into public education compared to the other 23 jurisdictions. I think we put maybe 12, 13%, where the state average is roughly 25 to 30%, Quay, into public education.
But weren't we supposed to be getting some of that money with the slots and that horseshoe thing that came in?
Lies. It's all lies.
Wait a minute. Wasn't that supposed to go into the educational system?
Now you see it. Now you don't.
What happened?
There are a lot of schools being built. Now, I'm curious too, and I'm not a Baltimore City resident, but it's interesting that there are new schools popping up in certain areas.
Where?
Where Black people are not.
Yeah. And there's not, that issue is not just in Baltimore. That issue is also in Anne Arundel County, where I live. Where the area or should I say, the trend is the property values increase. The people come to an area, and these people typically will have children and families, and there's a demand placed on schools. So
does anybody see
demand?
Quay, does anybody see the 11 o'clock news? The news at 11 o'clock every night, somebody got killed. And tomorrow night, it'll be the same thing in the same places. And these are neighborhoods with no schools and no recreation centers. We had recs. You used to live in Baltimore City, correct, Quay?
Yes, I grew up in Baltimore City.
Okay, what was your rec?
We had Northwood Rec. Yeah, with Northwood
It's
Rec.
not a priority anymore. The rec saved our lives.
Yeah, a lot of people went to the recs. But then the other argument would be, kids aren't outside now. If you ride past baseball fields during the summer, they have so many options of entertainment. I think recs would be one option, but there are a lot of ways that they could engage. I think even one thing that's been overlooked for years, I noticed something a few years ago. Did you know there's such thing as a youth minimum wage?
No.
I did not.
All right. So apparently, I always question, I said, man, how do you give a kid, experience at work? Because in many small businesses, which would frequently hire them, in increasing the minimum wage, you're raising the minimum wage also for young people who would get their first job. And now if you look at a McDonald's or you go into Walmart, a lot of the jobs that previously were occupied by teenagers and young people as their first jobs are occupied by retirees
Mhm.
and adults.
Mhm.
So how do we give young people an opportunity to work? So what there is there's a youth minimum wage, last time I checked, that allows young people to work at 50% of the minimum wage at the time. And they can work at that wage for several months to allow the employer to give them work experience for that young person to learn about the positions and get work and to learn just about the whole process of getting up and maintaining a job. And then they can get promoted to the full wage after that period. I'm surprised it's not being utilized because kids don't necessarily need, it's not about the amount of money, it's about learning the whole pride of work, learning to be responsible, work in an environment where a young person, if they worked 40 hours during the summer, they got $200 in the course of a week. An adult might say, oh, that's taking advantage of the child. But that $200 to a 15, 16-year-old is like they hit the lottery. You know, they can do a lot with that. They're not supporting a family on it. But that would allow, I think, creating job opportunities in mass for young people and not making them compete with adults. That may be a way to start with giving them opportunity.
So let me just say this, and that may happen in certain zip codes, but in a lot of those zip codes, the only income that they have where that's going to be reasonable, because in many cases, these young people have to help support their households.
Yes.
They do have to support their households, and selling drugs on the corner is going to get a better yield because we haven't created an environment where we don't have drug dealers on every other corner, and this whole community, the city, and many other cities across this nation have those environments where children are set in these spaces where they're having to sell drugs, or they're set in these environments where they're in trauma and they're seeing this 300 and some odd people who are getting killed every night. Those are happening in those neighborhoods. So we have to really put forth a different kind of effort when you're talking about zip codes and how people function within those communities, because it's not anything like what's happening in Anne Arundel County. It's not what's happening in a lot of these zip code areas that we want to believe that they're normal, and they're not. People are just trying to survive. You've got people getting killed where babies are getting killed in their mother's arms. So we've got some big issues that we have to address, and that this leadership in this city and this county and this state at the national level have to address, because it's not just Baltimore, it's happening across this nation.
Quay, where are people buying houses these days from a Baltimore-centric perspective?
Everywhere. There are obvious hot spots, but all over Baltimore City, Baltimore County. People are migrating to other counties, especially during COVID, because they're not now worried about commutes and those things as much. I think we're going to start looking at life almost like a pre-COVID, post-COVID, because I just think some things would never be the same.
Right.
I don't think some things will never come back.
Are there neighborhoods that you're seeing in Baltimore that are growing more, maybe a zip code or something where you're?
Yeah, where was hot spots?
Hot spots. Ashburton is a hot spot right now.
White people are moving to Ashburton.
Oh yeah. You know, I was surprised I was at a open house like a year and a half ago. Very diverse open house. Areas that were historically Black communities are now attracting a lot of people. Now, this is good because obviously supply and demand is what really dictates the market. So if you have more people willing to buy in that market, you're going to obviously drive prices up. So
why are people leaving the county, coming to the city?
Amenities. I think we looked at the trend, and I think during the earlier, like late 50s, a lot of companies left downtown Baltimore for suburbs. And as these employers were building their companies, they built housing surrounding them. And as those employers left and the employees are migrating, if you look at where businesses are opening, you'll know where people will be living. So I'll say right now, if you look at the map, you look at Port Covington, you look at what's going on in Harbor East, the areas surrounding it are blossoming because people don't want to spend their time in traffic.
Pardon my ignorance. You're saying Port Covington is not a flop?
No, I don't think so. I've actually, since we're speaking candidly, I've looked at office space there to relocate our headquarters to the Baltimore area. So we're looking for opportunities to bring our people. The difference is when you're a company that's across multiple states, a lot of our employees are scattered. That's a hard choice. So that's a hard choice where to locate. But
any advice for this incoming mayor tomorrow? Brandon Scott gets sworn in as the new mayor of Baltimore. Any advice from a realtor, real estate, banking, lending perspective?
I think anyone in leadership now should understand that you have to go deeper into every industry to talk to people at all levels.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to speak to the CEOs of a Long and Foster, talk to some of the managers in the real estate offices, invite them to the conversation to actually manage those agents in those communities. Mm-hmm. If you're going to talk to big banks, talk to small private lenders as well. Get a full picture of the landscape to make sure you're servicing the full population.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is somewhat out of your realm, but you went to Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, right?
I did.
Now, this mayor went to Mergenthaler Vocational Tech.
Yes.
Do you foresee Mervo having an impact on how Mayor Scott leads? Do you think he will be pushing vocational training on the young people? I hear him talk about young people a lot.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Scott on an occasion. And
why are you laughing, Marsha?
I'm just laughing.
I think your upbringing always has an impact on your character and what you can relate to. Mm-hmm. So I think that.
Come on, boy. Did you think a Mervo cat would be mayor of Baltimore?
Y'all funny.
Why not? I mean, I'll tell you, it's
y'all funny.
A lot of my friends who have done a lot right now came from Mervo, and surprisingly, some of the most successful people in the city right now are not the ones who went the traditional route through college. A lot of the guys who went the direction of construction, trades, and printing are the ones who are really knocking out the ballpark financially and really making major contributions to the community through hiring people and everything. So I think that I'm an advocate of trades. I would love to see Mervo pick up more, to be pushing people towards career fields.
Well, this is where he had me a little concerned. He said when he was at Mervo, or he alluded that they had cold classrooms. Now, if Mervo, a vocational tech school, has cold classrooms in the summertime, I'm concerned.
You still got to pay for it, Donnie, if you want to
pay for it.
You know, you got to have some heat. You got to pay for and they weren't distributing money to Mervo, apparently, with the school system.
Okay, one more thing, Quay. Any advice for a mayor when it comes to business? Because Baltimore seems very anti-business.
Why do you do that?
Oh my God, businesses run away from Baltimore. Unnecessary regulation, unnecessary licenses and taxes. I mean, just like Trump made it easy for banks to make money, the city of Baltimore makes it difficult for businesses to make money. Like when they closed down Cross Street Market temporarily, they lost some businesses, including a longtime flower shop. Now they relocated elsewhere. But when you're talking about red lines and purple lines and digging up this, your small businesses have carried your economy. At least that's my thought. Your thoughts, Quay?
My thoughts are we have some key resources in the business community that I think small businesses have failed to participate in. For example, the Baltimore Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Partnership. These have a large impact on the city. They have the ear of leadership. They have leadership ear, I should say that. So I think that small businesses, we haven't collectively, and I'm making a conscious effort to do more of this, and the small and mid-sized businesses, we need to be more involved within the current resources and within the current channels to make our voices heard. I think our absence from these conversations and operating in our own bubbles has come to our own despair, in many ways. I think
hard to get in the door that's not open. This board is shut. Where they
I don't know. Some doors are boarded, or maybe they're at the top of the staircase and we haven't started our way up.
But you have black people already in these doors. And my concern, Quay, is that when we get black people, you know, just like Harriet Tubman, she went back 19 trips, free 300. She made 19 trips. But we get black people in these bureaucratic positions and they're ghosts. They're like crickets.
Well,
they forget why they're there.
Well, let me address like the Will Holmes over at I think the Baltimore Chamber of Commerce and like Shalonda Stokes at Downtown Partnership. How many black businesses are actually involved? So we can't say we're excluded from the conversation, but the channels that have been pushing to make way, we're not present.
Yes, we can.
We're not present for those.
Yes,
so
we are. Yes,
I don't know. I think that looking at the amount of us that
we don't need black figureheads. We need black people like Marion Barry, like Maynard Jackson said, you will not do business in this city if you don't help empower this black community. Otherwise, why do we need black elected officials? To make excuses?
But you have to gather the businesses on collective.
You've been gathering since 1865. Baltimore is no stranger to black business.
I think now the difference has been we can't compare what we couldn't do with under other regimes to what we can do now with people who understand the struggle, who are from our community in power.
They don't seem to understand the struggle. I don't see them. I see, and I'm not even talking about the two that you have alluded to. I'm talking about historically over the past 20 years. Freddie Gray has happened. Empowerment Zone, $100 million. Money has come to our community, but black people who are in charge, when you look around, East and West Baltimore, Park Heights look the same.
Yes.
Well, I think we have an opportunity. We have a new mayor and the leadership that's already in place. If we become more involved and more vocal about
no, we've been involved. Stop that.
What?
But Donnie, what's the alternative? If we just say this is how it is and this is how it's going to be, then where does that leave us? We love radical change, but we have to also manage.
Not radical? To have a school where kids go and they're not freezing is not radical.
No, we're talking about the business. We're talking about the business community.
But if you don't, it's across the board. It's business, it's education, it's crime and safety. Look at the cops in Baltimore. Have you been to Baltimore lately, Quay?
Oh yeah.
They selling dope, coke, Ready Rock, weed in front of the police.
They've been doing it for the last 30 years.
No. Since Freddie Gray, it's been off the hook. It's been this.
Are you serious, Donnie?
I'm very serious. The police have taken a knee since Freddie Gray. So the crime goes up, the murders go up. We on par to pass last year. And so who wants to do business where they're killing everybody? Who wants to go to the harbor?
Well, they hasn't run off Under Armour.
And look at Under Armour. Look at Port Covington. All of those city council people gave incredible breaks to put Port Covington there. Next thing you know, what's the guy? Plank. They're talking about locking him up.
Yeah, it's its own city for real.
Yeah, but I mean, it's again.
But all of those city council people bent over. Oh, we got to help Port Covington. Oh, we got to help Port Covington. But we have failing schools. And now they're talking about making Baltimore City School CEO, sending her to the Department of Education. Are you kidding me? You're producing an inferior product. Quay, you went to Baltimore Polytechnic. What I learned at Poly is that they have been robbing children of algebra and geometry through the formative years, elementary school, 6th grade, 7th grade. What do we expect?
Well,
I'm sorry, you got me forever.
I know, because that's a multi-level.
Oh yeah, that's
our new mayor and his task force will start looking at and pulling all these pieces together, and then it's up to us to monitor how well they're doing and to make certain that they're on track with all the things that are important to us as residents of this community.
Yes.
Okay. Quay, how can people get in touch with you?
If I could say, can I chime in on something, because a lot of this is outside of my expertise. I would like to put something out there. With COVID-19, there were a lot of mortgage companies that a lot of people are asking. I'm surprised you didn't ask me about a housing crash are we finding one? I thought for sure we'd hit, because everyone's been talking about, and one of the trending topics is, are we going to see a repeat of 2008, 2009?
Right.
Because if we're seeing houses, there's no inventory. What's happening in the marketplace, or housing prices have gone up almost 20%, 16-20% in many areas just since January.
They've gone up?
Even though people are not working?
Even though people are not working, housing prices are through the roof. If you're looking to buy a house right now, you better have all your money. And in many cases, they're bidding over asking price on properties.
That doesn't make sense, Quay. It seems like it would be more affordable right now because nobody wants it.
Not at all. Everyone wants it. There's no inventory. Inventory was suppressed because people didn't put their homes on the market. And you pair that with a lot of people staying in their homes longer. So we have no inventory. In fact, it's such a crisis. I was personally in the market, and after numerous attempts, just said, hey, we're going to sit this one out for a little while. It's a lot going on in the market. And then if you pair that with the fact that people who normally would be in distress have gotten temporary relief through the form of the COVID forbearances that President Trump put out there, to allow people not to make mortgage payments without any justification or explanation. They were able to defer their mortgage payment 3, 6, even 12 months.
Wow.
So people, what we're seeing in the economy is, if people aren't making their mortgage payments, where's that money being diverted to?
Exactly.
We don't have yes, you have a lot of people that are now unemployed or underemployed, but you have a lot of people who are not financially impacted at all by the pandemic. And you have a lot of people that have waves of cash as a result of it too. So this is a really interesting market.
So if that's the case, then what should our audience be thinking about? How should they be functioning?
The first thing they need to look at is, if you don't need to move right now and you own a home and you're being offered the forbearance programs, you have to first evaluate if you really need it, because there's a cost to everything. And taking and adding extra interest on top of what you currently owe, deferring it, will put you further away from your long-term goal of having equity in the house. Especially in a situation later when you want to sell. And with interest rates being as low as they are right now, we have people getting interest rates in the low 2s. I've even seen high 1%. I never thought in my career I'd ever see that.
Right.
This is the time to lower your mortgage payments and to equip yourself for the long term. So if you're in a house, and whether you have equity or not, I think the focus should be lowering your mortgage payments.
So that's a refinance. Basically.
Refinancing, yes. Refinancing and lowering your interest rate to what the lowest it can be. I do not think we're going to see much lower, because at a certain point, it's just not worth it for the institution to loan the money if they're not making a certain amount of interest. I almost feel.
What are the interest rates now around?
Low 2s. Now I'm quoting mortgages. I have to quote my NMLS numbers, 49165, just for compliance purposes. Okay. But yes, you're talking, and I would have to give an APR. So an APR is somewhere around 2.3, 2.4.
What APR is?
APR is basically the in layman's term, it would be the interest rate if you factored in all cost in acquiring the loan. So that would be the APR. But bottom line, if you have a mortgage you've had for anywhere from a year, 6 months on, whether you've been in the house 20 years or 6 months, now's the time to look at lowering your interest rate. And you could lower your interest rate, not necessarily with your bank. We actually provide a service where we monitor rates for the clients that we work with. So anytime the interest rates drop, we notify the person. In many cases, we're able to facilitate lowering their interest rate without them incurring any cost.
Okay. Quay, how can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with us at equity1lending.com, equity1 lending.com, or they can call our office at 443-961-2500.
Can we get the number one more time, nice and slow?
443-961-2500. And that's equity1 spelled out lending.com.
And what are some of your products immediately available?
We specialize in FHA, VA, conventional mortgages, every Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac product. We're really competitive, extremely competitive on rates and pricing. And we're very flexible in understanding on the credit and income requirements. So basically, if loans can get done, we typically get them done.
Outstanding. Thank you, Clay.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This is an interesting. You always have interesting interviews, Donnie.
Got me revved up. Now I got to go get my political hat on. Go look into, the inauguration is tomorrow. Everyone stay attuned. Mr. Parker is right. We also have to get involved. We have to get involved in state politics. The number to your state elected officials is 410-841-3000. If you don't know who your city elected officials are, you can call 410-396-3100. It's not just enough to vote. You have to be involved in the process really on a regular, ongoing basis, just like Mr. Parker has to watch those APRs and new regulations that are coming down all the time.
I'd like to say something. My condolences to the Sarbanes family. Senator Paul Sarbanes, retired, passed away. And so he was a good guy and really did a lot of hard work in Congress, and we sorely miss him.
On that note, Marsha, I'll tell you something else we need to do here in the state of Maryland. We need a black U.S. senator from Maryland. Remember, Kwesi was the last one to run. And so, there's a lot of talk now that the election is over, but we must continue to hold Maryland accountable. This is a 2-to-1 Democratic state. Black people make up 30% of the population. Why we don't have a U.S. senator by now is unforgivable.
So when's the next election?
Congress is every 2 years. The Senate is every 6 years. So when the next state election rolls around in 2022, that's when we'll be voting for the current U.S. senator or a replacement. But I remember when Kwesi ran for Senate, U.S. Senate here in Maryland, he was ignored by the white powers that be, totally ignored. Well, it's like, okay, you can be a congressman, but you can't be a U.S. senator.
So maybe this is the time to start that conversation. When we talk about all the things that we want to have done, you need to be able to have somebody that's over in Washington to also sit on those committees to make it happen.
And while I'm at it, let me just throw in, there's going to be a governor's race in 2022. They're looking at Angela Alsobrooks down in Prince George's County, Johnny Olszewski out of Baltimore County, and also the comptroller, Peter Franchot. On the Republican side, I've heard the Lieutenant Governor, Boyd Rutherford. I've heard Michael Steele. I've also heard Kelly Schultz's name. So we must stay abreast. We must stay involved. There's no time to fall back. We have to stay on these people.
All right.
Okay, Quay, put your number one more time for people looking for Equity One lending.
Sure, that's 443-961-2500. I'll put it up also.
Okay. Well, Marsha, any final plug?
Yeah, just make sure if you are interested in receiving our weekly newsletter, send it to marshajews@gmail.com. Send your email address and we'll add you to our distribution. We have lots of information from the arts to programs that are going on around the state and around the country.
How many people do you reach on your newsletter?
A little over 8,000.
That's a hell of a bill. Okay. That's a great list, Marsha. Okay, Quay, thank you for taking the time out. Let's put a plug in for your daughter.
Oh, and if you have Black business or if you're looking to support Black businesses, please go to thinkblack.net. She made an app. My 15-year-old daughter, Kelsey Parker, created an app called the Think Black app, which is a directory of Black businesses across the country. Wow. You can register your business for free at thinkblack.net. And if you're a consumer, download the Think Black app. Before spending money, look to spend it with a local business. It will route you. It'll give you a list of whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for a dry cleaners, a restaurant,
I love it.
Recruitment contractor, it'll show you people in your area, give you contact information, reviews, and even give you directions on how to get there. Think Black. Thinkblack.net.
All right. Well, I need one of her ads.
You're paying me for this promotion.
That's all right.
We also hope that you join us this Thursday at 6 p.m. for the Black Wall Street 2020 virtual ball. Marsha Jews will be the host, and I will have on a tuxedo. There you have it. Thank you for joining us, and have a powerful day, everyone. Up to day down tomorrow. Do your day, and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it. I got to do it, regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.